Hello, beautiful. Welcome back to Openly Spoken, the podcast to help you show up, speak out, and be seen in healthy love. And in this podcast, we dive into all things self-love, relationships, and sexuality. Today, we are going to talk about a topic that's deeply personal for me, and I suspect it's personal for you too, which is why you clicked on this. But we're going to be talking about why serial daters need to take the time to be single and develop a strong foundation of self-love. So if you're someone who's hopped from one relationship to the next, or maybe you find yourself repeating patterns in relationships that leave you feeling unfulfilled, unseen, unheard, this podcast is a must listen for you. So grab your tea, your journal, or just settle into a comfy chair, maybe with something fuzzy blanket, fuzzy slippers, or fuzzy everything. I love fuzzy everything. And let's dive in. First things first, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is toxic relationships. Something that's unique about the work that I do and this podcast is that I specifically work with women with a history of toxic relationships. The reason why I think it's important to focus on toxic relationships and helping people stop that cycle is because the way our society, at least Western society, is set up, specifically here in the US, it's not set up in the way where children and babies have all of their needs met because there's not enough support for parents. And then because of that, we have unmet needs that we then grow up. And when we grow up, we are looking to fulfill those unmet childhood needs in our relationships. And this is one of the huge things that, in my opinion, creates toxic relationships, because we are going into relationships for all of the wrong reasons unconsciously. We are also not really given the chance to learn healthy relationship dynamics if we are living in a society where our very first experiences of relationships are essentially sabotaged because our caretakers have had to maybe work overtime or get extra jobs and just be really stretched thin to make ends meet and to pay for everything and to show up for us emotionally and all the things. So yes, with toxic relationships, often many of my clients will say something like, I always attract toxic people. Like, why does this keep happening to me? Or even worse, a lot of people will say, all men are trash. And by the way, I don't only work with women who get into relationships with men. I work with women who are across all different sexual orientations, but it is very common in not only the dating spaces, but even in feminist spaces to say that all men are trash. And that is a toxic behavior, girl. That is a toxic behavior. You're lumping an entire gender into one saying, and although your life experiences might have led you to believe that that is true, I invite you to look into how other things can be true instead. Okay, so the uncomfortable truth about toxic relationships and being kind of at this point where you realize like, oh, all my relationships have been toxic. The uncomfortable truth here is that it takes two people to be toxic. And this is not me telling you that you're to blame for someone else treating you in a certain way. This is something that I say to give you the invitation to really get curious, get honest, and humble yourself by looking in the mirror and realizing, where are the behaviors that you are doing that is contributing to a toxic relationship? Where are the behaviors that you are doing that is allowing others to think it's okay to treat you a certain way. And just know that it's not your fault. It's just an invitation to go within and to do that deep inner work so that in your next relationship, you're not bringing in some of the behaviors that lead to toxic dynamics. Okay. So I think what's important to then say here about why it takes two to be toxic is how to end that toxicity. So we will get into that later on in the episode, because I wanted to first touch on why serial daters need to take the time to be single and to develop that strong foundation of self-love. And one of the main reasons I would say is because when we go into relationships as adults, we are, like I said earlier, we're unconsciously looking to meet unmet childhood needs. And what is also really weird that is happening is we are also unconsciously looking for people with the same personality traits of the caretakers that couldn't meet those unmet needs in the first place. And this creates this kind of, what is the right word? You're going into dating without really being a fully grounded person. And what I mean by fully grounded is you're not completely clear on what it is that you want. So then when you go into dating, are you really making a conscious decision of the person that would really enrich your life? Or are you just settling for whoever is there? Are you just excited about a person because they're the one that gave you attention? And I won't get into this in this episode, but I think attachment style is a very important piece to look at here. And typically people with anxious attachment will tend to cling on to a person after just the first date, because they are the person that was nice to you or gave you attention. If you want to hear more about anxious attachment, there's an episode that I released last year, at the end of last year in October. It's episode 30 of season 2, and it's called Attachment Styles, How They Impact Self-Worth and Relationships. And it's with a dating coach by the name of Tara Newton-Gill. And in there, we talked extensively about anxious attachment style. So this piece of going into relationships without really fully exploring what were your unmet childhood needs, what are the things that you were unconsciously looking for, then makes your relationships deeply rooted in fear, because you are trying not to be hurt again like you were in childhood. You are trying not to be abandoned again. And this is, again, happening completely unconsciously. And it really is a light bulb moment for a lot of us, and myself included, when we are sitting on that therapist couch after, however many months it has taken for our therapist to really get to have a feel for what it is that we're playing out in relationships, and for our therapist to tell us something like, oh, you're codependent on that person, or like, oh, that person triggered an unmet childhood need. And even as a coach, it's very important in the sessions when I work with clients to look at, what does the inner child want? Because another piece about not exploring what your inner child wants, you're going into your relationships with your inner child being in the driver's seat. And a really clear indication that this is what's happening is if you have a frequency in your relationships of drama and fights happening a lot. If you have difficulty receiving criticism, if fights like kind of just escalate and explode all the time, fighting is actually it's actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And knowing how to fight well as a couple is actually a sign of a couple, of a relationship being strong enough to make it for the long term. And again, just a little side note about the long term is relationship success should not be measured on if it lasts forever or not, because sometimes it is the right thing to move on. And breakups is something that we are going to be talking about more often on this podcast, so I will touch on that more at another time. Okay, so with this piece about going into your relationships with deeply rooted fears and deeply rooted beliefs, I would invite you to really first just sit with to understand where does this come from. This can come from growing up with emotionally unavailable parents, which again, our society is basically designed so that our parents don't even have the capacity to be emotionally available. And if our parents are emotionally available, our society is designed so that our parents maybe aren't physically there because they're working all the time. So if you grew up with emotionally unavailable parents, you might believe that you have to earn love through overachieving, through sacrificing, through holding in your authentic opinions and your authentic voice. You don't learn that love is not something that you need to earn. It is something that you are inherently worthy of. And love is something that you are, essentially. These deeply rooted fears and beliefs can also stem from maybe being criticized for your emotions as a child. Maybe anger is something that your parents just didn't have any tolerance for. Maybe crying is something that was made fun of. And any kind of emotion that your caretakers did not allow space for will then make you grow up having a habit of suppressing your feelings, suppressing your emotions. And then that's going to lead to not being able to express your feelings and emotions in relationships, which will lead to miscommunication issues. And how this goes into deeply rooted fears and beliefs is all of this, everything that I've, said already, is leading to this fear of intimacy. And the fear of intimacy is really present when you have not worked on your inner child's fear of abandonment or your inner child's wounds of abandonment. And emotional wounds, I think because they're not a physical thing you can see, we forget that it is still a wound that needs a first aid kit. It is still a wound that could get quote unquote infected. And the infection of an emotional wound manifests as having toxic behaviors in relationships. It manifests as being someone who is very reactive, someone who can't take criticism, someone who has a hard time being present in relationships, has a hard time being present with listening. And your past, your childhood is still playing itself out in the present if you have not taken the time to confront it, to heal from it, to accept it. Your past is happening again and again now. It's not truly in the past until you really do confront it and heal from it. Okay, so let's go into maybe some things that you can do to bring out your deeply rooted fears and beliefs, because I think self-awareness is a really good foundational step into stopping this pattern of serial dating and stopping this pattern of getting into toxic relationships. And doing this kind of work really sets that foundation for you to go into relationships in a better mindset, with better energy, and with better outcomes of just being able to really enjoy love. That's really what I want for you. I want you to enjoy love and to have love be something that lights you up, that nourishes you, rather than something that is the cause of pain. Okay, so here are some things you can do. Very basic. You can do some journaling. And with the journaling, just really ask yourself, what do I believe about love? So an example could be, love is difficult. Relationships are hard. I'm not worthy of being chosen by someone that I'm attracted to. And then take a moment to challenge those beliefs. Are these things actually really true? Where did these beliefs come from? And also holding your past self that picked up these beliefs with so much compassion and love, and really taking the time to allow that past version of yourself to be held in whatever emotions it needs to express. Because there was obviously a time where they did not feel safe to express their emotions, which is why that is still something that's present within you today. And I would also invite you, someone asked me this today. I was a guest on Tiffany O'Hearn's podcast earlier today, and she asked me how I define love. So I would add that into this journaling practice, because your definition of love, which will be different for all of us, your definition of love is going to really shine a light on what it is that you need in a relationship. So for me, as an example, my definition of love is presence mixed with acceptance and mixed with support. So it's presence, acceptance, and support. And that really points to what it is that makes me feel seen and heard in love. Are they present with me? Do they fully radically accept me? And are they on my team? Are they on my side? Are they supportive? And that's really important it's really important inquiry, in my opinion, to, if you are in a relationship, is to really realize, is this person on my team? Are they on my side? Because for those of us who are stuck in that loop of toxic relationships, even when we come out of that and we are in a healthier relationship, I think we often forget that our partner is on our side. And that is something that comes up for me a lot. I often forget that my husband is on my side, and he so lovingly and graciously will remind me of that whenever we get into disagreements. And if you are still in that toxic loop, you might realize that the person you are with is truly not on your side and is not supportive of you. And so it's time for you to realize that you are worthy of having a person that is on your team. Okay, so that is some journaling that you can do. Feel free to actually pause right here and do that journaling before you continue listening to that episode, to the rest of this episode. Okay, second thing you can do, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's inner child work. So connecting with that younger version of you. And you can also get really curious with certain situations, maybe like the very last fight that you had in a relationship, really noticing where were the moments that you got triggered and connecting with your inner child in a way where you ask your inner child what they made that mean, and really showing up for that emotion and holding them. And then, very, very important to do some boundary setting with your inner child if you're able to do this. This is also something that I do in my coaching. You can do it on your own. Sometimes we need a coach to help us. But setting that boundary with your inner child where you let them know, I am here and I will listen to you. However, you are no longer in the driver's seat of my relationship. And this is only something that I think you can really be successful in if you really truly do learn to listen to your inner child, because then they feel seen and they feel heard, and that part of you is soothed and is able to not be like mischievous and take over the driver's the driving wheel. So then a third thing you can do, get support. You work with a therapist or work with a coach or do both. I would recommend, if you have never had therapy before, to work with a therapist first for a few months before you go into coaching. And all of that to say too, some of us will resonate more with therapy, some of us will resonate more with coaching, and there are also so many different types of therapists and so many types of coaching. I know a lot of people have good and bad experiences on both sides. The only difference I would say with coaching versus therapy, at least in my experience, from my experience of having therapists, having coaches, and now being a coach and looking into, this is going to be, it'll be a decade before I'm complete with this, but looking into getting the training to become a therapist myself, because I truly love the work that I get to do as a sex, love, and relationship coach, that I just want to learn more and more about how I can support people in these realms. So I'm very interested in becoming a therapist myself. However, I am not a therapist right now, so please do not confuse me and my coaching as therapy. It is not. Now I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Okay, the difference. The difference, I would say, is a therapist will be there to allow you to vent and talk through things. And they might ask you a couple of questions here and there, but from my experience, and I've had 3 or 4 different therapists, it hasn't been very many questions. It's been more of, I got to go there and vent and let everything out. And if anything, the question is, how did that make you feel? And the difference that I see with coaching, both with my experience of having multiple coaches and being a coach myself, is that a coach is more focused on getting you to move forward, which is why I recommend to work with a therapist first, because you don't want to gaslight yourself into moving forward. You want to give your healing process some time to really understand what's going on. I think that's something that therapists are really good at. Because you're sitting there and talking to them through every session, eventually your therapist will reflect back to you and say oh, these are codependency dynamics happening, or this person sounds like a narcissist, or that's covert abuse. Or they'll say something that gives you a realization about what happened in your past. And your therapist is really more of someone to digest your past with. And with coaching, some of the past work will come up because I do think inner child is a very important key piece of you that will really play out in your relationships. However, coaching is more focused on a goal in your future, and your coach is there to help you get to that goal in the future. And with coaching, at least the way I coach and in my experience of it again, is a coach will give you extra tools. Like you'll have homework between sessions. A coach will have a little bit more structure in the session of like, we're doing this practice today and we're going to center it around a goal that you have told me that you have. And it's kind of, each session is more of a continuation towards one goal or a couple of goals that you set in session one. Whereas therapy doesn't really have that linear, it's not really linear, is not the right word, but therapy doesn't really have that same like common thread. Like one session to the next can be completely different. Also, side note that therapists are diagnosing and treating mental health disorders and issues, and that is not whatsoever what a coach is doing or should be doing. And again, there's a lot of coaches out there that unfortunately are not certified and don't realize that you need a certification for specific skills to be able to hold space for people in a deep way. Just because you've gone through something and healed something doesn't mean that you have the skills to coach someone through that thing. And when you do learn the skills to coach people, you can coach them also through things that you have not gone through. So all of that to say, get support, get a therapist, get a coach. I myself am a certified sex, love, and relationship coach. And my links are always in the show notes or the caption. I also have I'll pop a little meditation, a free meditation in the caption that is a heart connection meditation. And that could be something that could help you with developing that foundation of self-love. Okay, so let's circle back to the kind of like some key pieces of how to stop the cycle of being in toxic relationships. So the main kind of thing that, in my opinion, will help you stop the cycle of toxic relationships is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is honestly the secret sauce of getting out of toxic cycles, because emotional intelligence is all about being self-aware, being able to, and the self-awareness is like you realize how you are feeling, what emotions are you feeling, what sensations are you feeling. And then from that self-awareness point, then it goes into being able to regulate. And being able to regulate is, in summary, being able to show up for what emotions and sensations are true within you and being able to self-care. That self-awareness and that self-regulation fills your cup so much that I think it gives you really deep skills to be able to have more empathy for other people. Because when you can understand your own emotions more and can have deeper relationships with your own emotions, you then recognize those same emotional experiences in other people when they share it with you. And it really helps you build the capacity to be able to see other people, to be able to have intimacy. And intimacy is not just reserved for the bedroom. Intimacy is also available in friendship, because intimacy is all about deep connection in a way that is truthful, that is present, and that is authentic. Truthful and authentic are the same thing. But so emotional intelligence will really give you the social skills to be able to advocate for yourself, to know what it is that you want, to not get into these toxic relationships in the first place. Because at its core, emotional intelligence is all about understanding and managing your own emotions while also being attuned to the emotions of others. So you, as someone who is managing and understanding your own emotions, you are already whole as you come into a relationship. And I think that's a good point to touch on too, is to come to this place of where you feel whole on your own. And I think with serial daters, that is something that is kind of like on the back of our minds, where we don't feel whole when we're single. We feel like everyone else is in a relationship and there's something wrong with me because nobody loves me or whatever it is. If you can come to a place where you can actually feel okay and feel whole with being single, it's going to completely change the types of relationships you then become available for. Because then you have that deeper connection to yourself, which means you can realize your desires. You can realize what it is that you need, what it is that you want. And it's only with those realizations of what it is that you need and want that you can be able to choose partners that enhance that. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this emotional intelligence piece, starting with the self-awareness. So I mentioned that self-awareness is about noticing and understanding your emotions and your sensations. It's also about recognizing what is it that triggers you and what are patterns that you tend to repeat in relationship. And I'd invite you to look into both romantic relationship and friendships. So an example is if you find yourself getting really anxious when your partner takes time for themselves, or when your partner goes and hangs out with their friends without you, a good question to ask yourself would be, what fear is this bringing up for you? So what fear is this bringing up for me? Usually, if you really sit with that question, you'll realize that the fear has nothing to do with your partner's actions, and it has everything to do with an unresolved wound from your past within you. And that's not to say that that something is wrong with you, that you are unworthy of healthy love. This is totally normal. Our society is literally designed in a way where it's almost impossible to come out of our childhood without any wounds. And even if we figured out a way for society to meet all of it, the human condition is suffering anyways. And so having unmet and unresolved wounds and having traumas, whether it's capital T trauma or lowercase t trauma, is normal. And it's also very beautiful and sacred because it gives us an opportunity to step up for ourselves. It gives us an opportunity to love ourselves. It gives us this kind of stepping stone on a journey where we can show up for what's really hard, and we can feel super strong when we make it through to the other side. And in my opinion, being able to go through things like that gives you so much more depth when you connect with other people, because you can recognize when other people are in a space that you have felt before, and you can have way more empathy for them. So the next piece that I'll dive into a little bit more with emotional intelligence is the second piece I mentioned of self-regulation. So self-regulation is all about showing up for your emotions and learning how to manage your emotions. And I think the most important tool for managing your emotions is mindfulness. And within mindfulness, I think breath work is the most basic foundational practice that you can do. Because when you feel a certain emotion, the very first thing that's going to shift is your breath. And we all know how good it feels to stop and pause and take a couple of deep breaths when things feel overwhelming. And so what if you started practicing stopping and pausing and taking those couple of deep breaths every single day before any overwhelm comes in? And I really emphasize that every single day, even if you just take 1 minute per day to do this, I swear to you, it is going to completely change your life, because it's that regularity that creates the muscle memory within your psyche that it is safe to exist, it is safe to feel what you are feeling, and that you are showing up for you, that you matter, that you are taking that time to ground and to calm your nervous system. And what's also so great about this that really contributes to stopping serial dating, stopping toxic relationship patterns, and also building that foundation of self-love is that taking that time, that mindfulness pause, that practice, if you are doing it every day, which again, you can do just 1 minute per day, it shows up outside of your practice. And what I mean by that is when you make pausing a habit, pausing and breathing, then you start to pause in your everyday life before you respond to things. You end up responding to life instead of reacting to life. And what I specifically mean about this with relationship is when there's some sort of disagreement, instead of lashing out and reacting, if you take the time to pause every single day as a practice, you will eventually notice that instead of lashing out in fights, you are able to recognize, like, oh, I am feeling that tendency to scream. Let me pause and stop. And my husband and I, we do this all the time. Whenever we get into an argument, either him or me, like, it'll be at a point where we're like, oh, I'm feeling the urge to yell at you. I need a moment to breathe. Otherwise, I'm going to just like scream and say something that I don't actually mean. And that's what gets to happen for you when you take the time to really learn the skill of emotional intelligence. You really do learn how to have disagreements and have fights in a way that is actually productive and is actually healthy, and shifts fighting from this energy of me versus you to instead it being us versus the problem. Us versus the problem. Developing emotional intelligence is a practice. It's not about being perfect with it. It's about that progress. And again, the mindfulness, really doing that every day, is the repetition is where the magic lies, which is why I invite you and really, really invite you to do that for 1 minute per day. 1 minute. You have the time for 1 minute. I know you do. And when you start with the 1 minute, you can increase it maybe in a week to 2 minutes, and just really gradually increasing it to I don't know, maybe 15 minutes. You don't have to meditate for an hour for it to be effective. However, for meditation to be effective, for breathwork to be effective, for mindfulness to be effective, it does have to be something that's happening regularly, because then it becomes a habit that is showing up in your everyday life when you are not on the yoga mat, when you are not on the meditation cushion. It ends up showing up in your life. And that is why I used to be a yoga teacher in the past. I never intended on being a yoga teacher. I just saw how the practice, once I practiced it regularly, was showing up in my everyday life off of the mat. And I was like, oh my gosh, I found the hack to having a happy life. I need to share this practice with everybody. And then, of course, that led to me having to face my fear of public speaking. And just long story short, here we are now on a podcast. Okay. So if you are a serial dater, or you are someone that has been in this loop, you've recognized that you have been in a loop of being in toxic relationships, or you have realized that you don't feel comfortable being single, I really encourage you to do these things in this episode, and I'm going to summarize them all as takeaways. Number 1, looking at the ways that you contribute to toxic relationship dynamics. And I will also go deeper into how to stop toxic relationship dynamics in a future episode. So the takeaways: 1, look at how you are contributing to toxic relationship dynamics. 2, looking at emotional intelligence and really making emotional intelligence and raising your, IQ, or your emotional intelligence IQ, and really working on that being a gradual process instead of being perfect overnight. Looking at number 3, looking at your deeply rooted fears and beliefs. Number 4, leaning into the mindfulness, which I know we talked about when we talked about emotional intelligence, but I do think that deserves to be kind of like something that stands on its own. And, when you are in this pattern of serial dating or toxic relationships, I know it can be really hard to feel really defeated and to not know what to do next. But taking that time every day, I know it might sound ridiculous to some people, but taking that time every day just for a minute to pause and breathe with yourself. It might feel like you're doing nothing, but that is going to help you in the long run with creating better relationships, because mindfulness is helping you connect with your body in a deeper way. It's giving you that self-awareness. It's giving you the ability to self-regulate. And all of those things are going to lead to higher emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is the secret sauce to stopping that pattern of toxic relationships. And all of these things that we talked about in this episode are going to help you with building a strong foundation of self-love. So before we close out, let's go deeper into building that strong foundation of self-love. What are some of the things that you can do to stop the patterns of always needing to be in a relationship or always ending up in toxic relationship? So the first thing I'll recommend for you, if you are a serial dater, please take a break from dating. Please, please, please take a break from dating other people and instead date yourself. Take yourself out on dates. Get dressed up for you. Make a fancy meal with a lit candle and wear a fancy outfit just for you. Do it just for you. Date yourself. And on the topic of dating yourself as well, this even goes into self-pleasure. When you interact with your own body, treat yourself as if you are a present and compassionate lover to your own body. Listen to your body's nose. Listen to your body's nose, please. When you listen to the no, you will hear the yes. How do we build a strong foundation of self-love, though? Firstly, I will encourage you to do self-love rituals. So some regular thing on your candle, on your candle. I'm still thinking of lighting candles. Some regular thing on your calendar, like a weekly date with yourself. Like I just said, date yourself. So when you do a ritual, I think ritual is a very great tool to be able to access your subconscious in a way where your subconscious will receive the message of I am worthy and I am love. And the way your subconscious receives these messages is by you really honoring that weekly date with yourself, and B, taking into consideration all of your sensations and having your ritual include something for each sensation. So for the sensation of sight, can you go to a really beautiful place? Or can you specifically set up your space at home in a beautiful way for your ritual? Can you make yourself a beautiful meal and maybe put a garnish on the meal? I know putting a garnish is something you would usually only see in a restaurant, but can you do that at home as well and as a part of your ritual? Maybe you make a brand new dish that you've never made before to play with your sensation of taste. Maybe you light those candles to set the mood. Maybe the candle has a certain scent to it, although I know that's not actually very healthy. I personally don't like candles anymore. There's a toxicologist on social media that ruined candles for me. But you can use flowers. You can use treats like chocolates as a part of, like, your ritual can literally be anything that you want. But I encourage you for it to be time where you are not on social media, not on a screen. You are honoring it. It is something that is in your calendar regularly, whether it's once a month, whether it's weekly, whether it is bi-weekly. It can also be something that you do every day. Maybe you do a self-love ritual every morning or every evening. And then having something for every sensation. So that's your sense of sight, your sense of taste, touch, smell, and hearing. Okay. So the next one is for how to create a strong foundation of self-love is to practice embodiment. So you can do activities like yoga, you can do activities like dance. You can also, shameless plug, you can join my breast massage course, Heart Magic. As of the time of this recording, it is on waitlist, but you can join the waitlist. And in Heart Magic, there is breast massage practices and also a ton of embodiment practices. And I also deep dive into what embodiment actually really is. What are all the deep layers? And embodiment can really help you reconnect with your body and cultivate a sense of worthiness from within and help you not only cognitively know, but also somatically feel that you are inherently worthy of healthy love. Okay, a third way that you can build a strong foundation of self-love is to reconnect with your passions. So maybe thinking back to some of the things that you really used to love when you were younger. Maybe there was something that you wanted to get into in the past and your parents didn't support it, whether it didn't like work out schedule wise, maybe it was too expensive or whatever the case may be. Are there ever any hobbies that you enjoyed or hobbies that you wanted to get into? And the invitation here is to really reconnect with that sense of passion, of doing something just because you love it. And I think that's something that we don't do enough these days because we spend a lot of our time on our screens. You're probably going to hear my cat. He's now in my lap and like rubbing himself on my mic. I think connecting with your passions and doing something just for the love of it is something that is really needed in today's world because we have social media that is purposely designed for us to spend as much time as possible on it. And because of that, we spend more time than we intend to when we check our Instagram or TikTok or whatever accounts that it is that you'd like to go on. You can probably resonate with the fact that even if you go to check just one thing, before you know it, an hour has gone by. And I think because of that, we are not spending our time doing things that we actually love and really making that commitment to put that time aside to do something that we love for the fun of it, rather than being on devices that show us what everyone else is up to, or being on devices that are just constantly entertaining us with videos. And if you're interested in the whole like social media overuse stuff, I just read this book called, let me pull it up on my Goodreads. It's called Unwired, Guy Bernstein, Unwired, Gaining Control Over Addictive Technologies. And if you're interested in reading about how social media is inherently addictive and purposely addictive, there's a book recommendation for you. Okay, tangent averted, back to some practical tips for building a strong foundation of self-love. Building a supportive community, surrounding yourself with friends and with mentors who uplift and inspire you. And that's just to remind you that relationships don't have to be romantic to be fulfilling. Friendship is a really powerful mirror, and friendship will help you know more deeply who it is that you are, which will then in turn help you get more clear on what it is that you want out of a romantic relationship whenever you do go back into dating. And then the fifth and final tip that I will leave you with today for building a strong foundation of self-love is setting boundaries. Saying no to what doesn't serve you, saying no to whatever you and your body are a no to, and know that the more you honor your no, the more your yes will become more apparent to you. I know one of the things that some of us can struggle with when it comes to dating is not really knowing what it is that you want, but you can't know what you're a yes to if you don't know what you're a no to first. And so a really fun tool for that, actually, because it's sometimes easier to know what we're a no to, I recommend for you to write down a list of things you're a no to in relationships. And then next to each thing that you are a no to, see if you can write what you are a yes to instead. And it most times will just be like the opposite thing of that. Okay, so setting boundaries. A good resource for setting boundaries is a book called Set Boundaries, Find Peace. I think the author is Nedra Glover Tawwab. I can't grab the book right now because we are in the midst of packing for a move, and that book is packed in a box. But if you Google Set Boundaries, Find Peace, you will find that book. I cannot highly recommend that enough. Okay, so before we wrap up, I will leave you with just this final thought that taking the time to be single and to build self-love isn't about waiting for the right partner to come along. It's about becoming the version of yourself who already knows that you are whole and who already knows that you are inherently worthy of healthy love. And I hope that that distinction between waiting for the right partner to come along versus becoming this version of you, I hope that distinction really illustrates the importance of stopping the cycle of serial dating and highlights the importance of pausing to really set that deep foundation of self-love and really allowing yourself to be okay with being single. And so it's about becoming that version of yourself that knows you're already whole and worthy of healthy love. And the love that you create within yourself is going to ripple out into every relationship you have. And I mean every relationship, not just with people, even your relationship with food, with money, with your body, with nature, with work. It is honestly life-changing. So if today's episode resonated with you, I will invite you to download my free heart connection meditation, which I will put in the caption below so that you can get started with a little self-love foundation journey. Maybe you turn it into a little ritual for yourself. And if you want to take this work deeper, there's a link to my website in the show notes, and you can find my one-on-one coaching in there. And I'm currently my one-on-one coaching is also on waitlist. And thank you so much for spending this time with me today, for listening to this show. And remember that you are worthy of showing up, speaking out, and being seen in healthy love. And you are so deeply held and loved by the universe. And until next time, bye. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Openly Spoken. I know that there's an abundance of content online, so I really appreciate you giving me your ears today. If this episode shifted something for you, please share this with a friend or write us a podcast review if you're listening to this on iTunes so that more people can find this. If anything shifted for you from this episode that you want to have a conversation about, I would love to hear from you. Just send me a DM over on Instagram at selfexpressbabe, and that is in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.